Hello, I'm Sayan Song and I am the presenter. The topic of this presentation is renal responses to high altitude. In high altitude climbers, the kidneys play a crucial role in acclimatation and in acute mountain sickness. So, what is AMS? Acute mountain sickness is caused by acute exposure to low partial pressure of oxygen and high altitude. AMS is relatively frequent and affecting approximately 25% of those traveling above 2,500 meters. If recognized earlier, it can be self-limiting. AMS have been attributed to hypoventilation, impaired gas exchange, fluid retention, and increased sympathetic drive. Headache, anorexia, vomiting, fatigue are the symptoms of AMS. After long-term exposure to high altitude, human's body overcomes AMS by physiological responses coded as acclimatization. There are physiological responses like respiratory system, increasing cardiac output, increasing erythropoiesis by increased renal erythropoietin secretion, enhancing tissue oxygen delivery and extraction. Respiratory responses are especially well-known and major response to high altitude, caused by lack of oxygen in high altitude. Hypoxia, increased diffusing capacity, alveolar O2 delivery, and decreased alveolar CO2. In the process of decreasing alveolar CO2, hypocapnia and respiratory alkalosis becomes an issue. When this happens, kidney compensates for the alkalosis by excreting the excess bicarbonate and conserving hydrogen ion. Focusing on this point, we are going to discuss renal responses to high altitude. First, one you had seen earlier, respiratory alkalosis is a condition in which increased respiration elevates the blood pH. Here's the equilibrium about carbon dioxide, bicarbonate, and hydrogen ion in plasma. Hyperventilation causes the loss of CO2. Hydrogen ion and bicarbonate are shifted to make more CO2. Therefore, the pH level increased by reduced hydrogen ion. Now, look on the graph. When respiratory alkalosis takes place, it goes to the point A, the normal state to point C. You can recognize that as carbon dioxide concentration decrease, plasma bicarbonate also decrease and pH level increase. Renal compensation is the body's primary method of compensating for conditions of respiratory exosis or respiratory alkalosis. The kidney regulates the acid-base balance by altering the amount of hydrogen ion and bicarbonate excreted in the urine. We could confound this idea by conducting virtual experiment program PhysioX. At tubular cells, H2O and CO2 are polymerized by carbonic anhydrase and makes bicarbonate, then excreted to urine. At this process, hydrogen ions are reabsorbed to interstitial space by sodium pump in the opposite direction of potassium ion. At respiratory alkalosis, bicarbonates are excreted and hydrogen ions are reabsorbed. Therefore, bicarbonate concentration increase in urine and hydrogen ion decrease in urine. Briefly, here is stage of renal compensation. First, hypoxia deprive of adequate oxygen supply. Response to lack of oxygen concentration, hyperventilation occurs. Then hyperventilation-induced hypocapnic respiratory alkalosis. Finally, by increasing renal bicarbonate excretion, kidney can compensate respiratory alkalosis. This diagram is mechanisms of the hypoxidretic response leading to decreased plasma volume. Hypoxia may promote increased natriuresis, water diuresis, and fluid shift away from intravascular space. The attendant increases in renal excretion of sodium and water. The hypoxia diuretic response is triggered within hours of exposure to hypoxia. This initial phase is followed by coordinate humoral responses involving norepinephrine, renin, and ADH, triggered by hypoxia-induced chemoreceptor stimulation. The stimulation increased arterial natriuretic peptide ANP and BNP. On the other hand, it decreased ADH and it inhibited renal sensitivity to ADH, leading to inhibition of renal sodium reabsorption despite low water and sodium intake, and to a natriuretic diuresis. Finally, hypoxia acts directly in the kidneys to increase local production of endothelin and adrenomedullin. This substance reduces circulating ADH, renin, and aldosterone. Moreover, suppress renal sympathetic nerve activity. As diuresis and natriuresis at kidney is direct responses causing reduction of body fluid, there are some indirect factors cause hypovolemia. Because of increased insensible fluid loss and decreased fluid intake makes hypovolemia. And increased insensible fluid loss is due to low humidity at high altitude and tachypnea. Decreased fluid intake is due to decreased thirst and anorexia. As described above, one of the most remarkable changes in response to brief exposure to high altitude is dehydration. Due to hypovolemia, GFR is also decreased. Diminished plasma volume is part of the body efforts to supply oxygen to the most vital organs. In other words, it increases oxygen consumption to maximize sodium reabsorption and water reabsorption as well. Therefore, body fluid got supplemented by this process. However, when ADH, renin, and aldosterone concentration get too much high, it may develop AMS. Then, how can you handle the volume at high altitude? At dehydration during acclimatization, drinking water with minimal added salt is advisable. It distributes into the intracellular compartment with minimal extracellular space expansion. After diuretic response has run its course and fluid accumulation becomes an issue, water intake and food intake should be monitored carefully. There are several well-known effective pharmacologic treatments for AMS: acetazolamide, ibuprofen, dexamethasone, salmeterol, phosphodiesterase inhibitors. Acetazolamide showed improved pulmonary gas exchange and relieved symptoms in AMS. These are the mechanisms for relieving AMS by acetazolamide. First, it increases diuresis. Second, it enhance ventilation driven by increased respiratory ecstasis and metabolic ecstasis. This respiratory ecstasis and metabolic ecstasis is due to inhibition of tissue and renal carbonic anhydrase, respectively. Lastly, it improves quality of sleep due to carbonic anhydrase inhibition in the carotid body. So far, we can conclude that the kidneys plays a crucial role in acclimatization at high altitude. At short-term exposure to hypobaric hypoxia stimulus of altitude, there are rapid and powerful diuretic response and risk to hypovolemia. This altitude-induced diuresis is due to decreased circulating concentration of ADH, renin, aldosterone, and increased level of AMP. Those who well adapted at high altitude restoration of body fluids are proceeded. In contrast, those who develops AMS, they are excess fluid retention by increased ADH, renin, and aldosterone. Consequently, volume regulation by kidney is both improvement to high altitude adaptation and maladaptive development of mountain sickness. Thank you.